Episode 142 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone doing? As you can see from the background, I am back at Interpretation Station, the headquarters in Switzerland, which means that, yes, unfortunately, this afternoon I go back to the drudgery of work. What do you do? Yesterday it was, as they call it here, la rentrée. All the kids go back to school, and well, yes, today the Interpretation Station goes back to school as well, but not before this morning, this 23rd of August 2022. I give you the episode that you've all been waiting for. Oh yes. This is a primer that I'm going to give you on working at the UN. Right? Now, don't get excited. It's not going to be one of those videos, where I take you around the premises and introduce you to all my colleagues, lovely people though they are, show you all around the glitzy cafeteria and the booths and all that. I think there are plenty of videos on the old interweb where you can see that sort of thing. No, the episode, this primer that I'm going to give you, I think it's probably going to be a two-parter actually, is to give you basically a guide on what to do on that day, on that glorious day, if and when it comes, when you're either invited to do a UN internship, let's say, or you've been offered your first contract at the UN, or you've your first freelance contract, or maybe it's you've been given a permanent contract at the United Nations, and you're about to go, and you're wondering, okay, so I'm going to work at the UN. How do I prepare myself for what's going to be coming at me? What sources can I use to prepare to get myself, in the right frame of mind for the kind of meetings that are going to be taking place at the UN, for the kind of vocabulary that's going to be hitting you and that sort of thing. And I wasn't initially just going to do just one episode, but I think it might be actually easier if I do two episodes. And I'm going to split it up into so today's episode is about how to prepare if you're going to work at UNOG. Okay, that's the United Nations office in Geneva. How to prepare, what are the texts, what are the sources to look at. And in another episode, I will look at New York. Because I've never worked in Vienna or Nairobi, I know the sort of committees, obviously, that sit there, that meet there, but I've never had any direct experience of working there. Maybe if one of my colleagues from the UN or someone who has experience working in either of those two duty stations, as they are called. That's an important word, okay? No, duty stations. Maybe they can help me make an episode that might be interesting. But we're going to stick to Geneva, UNOG, and New York headquarters for now. So with that little introduction, let's see what the best place to start is. Okay, so I think we're ready to start now. So I've done a couple of little preparations here in the office. My wife always criticizes me when I make these episodes and I leave stuff hanging up on the door there. There's, you can usually see towels and things hanging down. So I've taken the towel down, and then I can see there's a t-shirt there. Let me just move the t-shirt. Look at that. And there's Maggie, by the way, the Interpretation Station mascot. She's joined us for today's episode. Say hi, Mags. Yes. She's a bit sleepy. Anyway, she's going to be with us. If you get bored of looking at me, you can always watch Mags. Okay, so this episode, before we go any further, I should say, it's really designed for people with all language combinations. You don't have to have a UN language combination, I think, to find a benefit from this episode. If you're working in any country with any language on matters related to the UN, okay, hopefully this episode can provide you with some pointers on how to improve, to sort of expand your knowledge of how the organization works, of its inner working. So don't feel that, I don't know, if your combination's Italian and Japanese, that you can't get anything from this episode. If you're working on UN-related matters, then hopefully, as I say, you can learn a few new things from this episode. Now, the most obvious place to start with any sort of primer, as it were, on the UN, regardless actually of where you're working, doesn't matter in Geneva, your first port of call should be the UN Charter. Okay, now I'm going to be sharing the screen with you a lot today during this episode. So actually I'm going to close myself there. And the UN Charter is so easily accessible, right? There we go, we open it there. Search UN Charter, there it takes you to this, and look, it takes you straight in, okay, to the UN page featuring the Charter, with a breakdown of all the parts of the Charter. We have the preamble, the chapters, that's an important one, purposes and principles, membership organs, there you go. Here's the preamble. So my advice to you, the most basic thing you can do, if you're not going to do anything else before you start working at the UN, is have a read through the Charter. It's not thrill a minute, okay, but it's all right. It'll take you about maybe an hour to get through, and it gives you so many of the most important basic expressions that are used time and again at the UN. That purposes and principles is one of the most important things. Pacific settlement of disputes, breaches of the peace, okay, non-self-governing territories. It's all the key stuff. Now, while reading the Charter, as I say, the most beginner level of preparations, if you want to do a little bit more, okay, if you want to go to the next level, I advise you to memorize, to learn by heart this bit, the preamble of the United Nations. Let me read it to you, okay? We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom, and for those ends to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbours, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest, and to employ the international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations, and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations. Okay, and you go and you have all, this in all 6 UN languages as well. Okay, Chinese, Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. And just looking, through here, there's so many of these little words, little expressions that come up all the time. Save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, faith in fundamental human rights, nations large and small, obligations arising from treaties. What else could we say? Good neighbours, maintain international peace and security, international machinery, that's an expression that comes up quite a bit, the social advancement of peoples. Okay, so just in these few lines alone, you have so many of these these buzz phrases at the UN. So that would be the next level up, I would say. Learn the preamble, okay, in your native tongue. Now, if you want to take it another step further, is then to also read the charter in your other languages, in your working languages. Okay, so for me that would also be French, Russian, and Spanish. And, you know, cross-reference these expressions. That's going to give an even deeper understanding, knowledge of the charter, to see, you know, just to cross-check what are the like-for-like expressions that are used in your target language. And one excellent tool to help you to do this, I may have mentioned it before in previous episodes, but we do have a glossary. There is a during COVID times, myself and my colleague, so this has to go chiefly the credit to my colleague, Mr. Dylan Westfeld. We did a glossary on the UN Charter, okay, and he did the French and the Spanish versions. I did the Russian, and I'll show it to you now. It's really good. Okay, it's quite, you know, so it takes all these expressions, like here's just an example, you know, able and willing, accept petitions, adjustment or settlement of disputes. Here you have the equivalents in the English, French, and Russian. Unfortunately, no one did a Chinese or Arabic version. If anyone's feeling particularly keen and, I don't know, fancies giving themselves a bit of work, it's really good. Just from a language perspective, you know, it's pretty, sometimes it can be a bit tedious. You're just looking up in the one version what the equivalent expression is in another version, but just that exercise alone, slightly tedious though it is, does expand your knowledge of the charter. What else do we have here? Deposited with, okay, stavаться на хранение. It's all these interesting, sort of slightly bureaucratic expressions, and just the charter language in all four languages. So I will put a link to that glossary so that that you can go and consult it in your own time, and I think that would be very, very beneficial. So yeah, easiest place for anyone going to work at the UN, start off with the charter, okay? Now, another sort of general source that I would perhaps advise you to look at, again, whether you're working in Nairobi, Vienna, Geneva, New York, have a look at the SDGs, okay? The Sustainable Development Goals. Now, their significance is, again, pretty cross-cutting, as they say at the UN transversal. They're gonna be talked about equally in any of the duty stations. So if I go to the site, okay, here we go. Yes. So if you go to the site here, SDG, I'll put in links to all these sites. Although, again, it's very easy to find them by just Googling, SDGs. Now here, what would I advise to look at? Okay, well, have a look at the names of the 17 SDGs, first of all. That's a pretty straightforward place to start. But as important as the names of the goals themselves are the targets, okay? The sort of sub-targets. So on each goal, have a look, click on each goal. Here's goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. And find the targets and indicators. And that these to me are the vocab that is used all the time. Okay, so here we have the SDG 1 has what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 goals, basically. 1A, 1B. Okay. Eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere. Reduce by at least by half the proportion of women at all ages living in poverty. So each goal has about, 6 or 7 targets. And again, it's I hadn't actually looked. I must confess, I when you've been doing a job for like 13 years, you have a tendency to wing things. So I've never taken an in-depth look at the goals and targets. I have a sort of superficial knowledge of them, with which I can, as I say, wing it. What I might do is actually I might make an episode, I think, on the SDGs, going through the goals and targets, picking out specifically what is the most important vocabulary within these targets. Like, look at this, like reducing exposure and vulnerability to climate-related extreme events. That's something, again, they'll talk about that all the time. And, whatever the French is or the Spanish is, I can more or less turn that into the right English. But it makes a big difference if you have the time, just to be familiar, to know what's coming, and to almost know the vocabulary, the actual wording almost by heart. Okay, so I think I'll probably make an episode sometime soon on the SDGs to help you with that. So that's something I would definitely advise you to look at. Okay, the SDGs, look at the goals and the targets. Look at paying special attention to the wording, and again, look, you've got it in all 6 of the languages. And what's more, again, if you don't have a UN language, the document like the Charter or the SDGs, I think it's pretty easy to find them in your own native tongues. I mean, it is the UN, so the idea is for these ideas to be accessible in all the global languages. So I don't think you'd have too much difficulty finding out what they are in your own languages, and it will help you a lot. Okay, so those are a couple of the more general things to be looking at, UN-wise across the board. So I'm going to focus now specifically on Geneva. As I say, that is what is freshest in the old interpretation station mind, and I think that's the easiest place to start. And so, the thing when you go and work in Geneva, the big issue in Geneva, the flagship theme, if you like, of the work at Geneva are human rights. Okay, that's really the UN home for human rights issues. And if you like, the Bible on human rights, the founding document, shall we say, as the Charter is the founding document for the whole UN. The founding document at the UN for human rights is the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Or should I say the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So again, this is what, if you're going to work in Geneva or do an internship, have a read of the declaration, okay, the UDHR as it's called, okay. There you go. Again, I've just Googled the UDHR, takes me to here, text of the declaration, gives you a bit of background, for example, on this page. And then it gives you the full text with the preamble and all the articles. How many articles? 30 articles. It's not a long one. This will take maybe half an hour to read. It's shorter than the Charter. And again, it provides you with all the buzzwords, all the buzz expressions that you need to, just to give yourself a foundation from which to expand your knowledge. And one thing I should have mentioned, that I can say for the UDHR, and which I should have mentioned before about the Charter, is that I have actually done episodes doing a breakdown of those two documents, of both the Charter and the UDHR. Now, they were done specifically for Chinese viewers, okay, for those of you speaking Chinese. I did them with my sort of buddy Zoe. Now, if we look here, so this shows all the interpretation station episodes. If you look here, episode 95, okay, Interpreter's Guide to the UN Charter, Chinese and English. Now, don't be put off by the fact that it's for Chinese. Most of the episode we speak English. I don't know any Chinese, so don't worry. And what we have, so I just break it down again. I look at the most important bits of wording within the Charter. So Zoe gives the Chinese equivalents, but it doesn't matter if you don't have Chinese. I would suggest, again, if you want a sort of breakdown of the Charter, watch that episode. And it's always good to have a copy of the charter in your own language, then you can do that cross-referencing. I just pick out, the main points, so you just look them up in your own version, okay, and I'll explain to you their significance. So that's episode 95. And then we do something very similar, almost identical, okay, in episode 105. Interpreter's Guide to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Okay, exact same idea. Taking you through the most important articles, the most important ideas. If you've got Chinese, great, then you'll be able to have a direct rendering of each one of those important phrases that I highlight. Otherwise, again, just have a copy of the charter or the declaration in your own language at the ready, and find out what the key expressions are. So those are two things to look at there for the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Moving on. Now, the big showpiece event at the UN in Geneva is the Human Rights Council. Okay, that's the big glamour. That's where the glamour is in Geneva. New York tends to be obviously more glamorous because they have the General Assembly, the General Debate, the Security Council, and so on. So in Geneva, the glamour comes at the Human Rights Council. Okay, so you really want to do a bit of preparation. Look at issues. Look at the style of meetings that are going to take place during the Human Rights Council. It's the most political, certainly, of all the bodies that meet there. Okay, so if you go to the home page here, okay, gives you a bit of background about the Human Rights Council. Now, where can you find? You probably want to know. Okay, where can I practice speeches from the Human Rights Council? What are the best places to look? Okay, so if you go to the Human Rights Council, as I said, the kind of debates they have, they're very similar to what happens, let's say, at the General Debate, at the General Assembly, the Security Council. It can get quite fiery. They talk about all the most pressing issues of the day. So here I'm looking at special sessions. These can be very useful. Because so look, they had the special session not long before I went on holiday. Okay, this was in the 12th of May 2022. The deteriorating human rights situation in Ukraine stemming from the Russian aggression. And one thing, a good overview of things is, if you go to statements, that you've got here, statement by Bachelet, the boss. Okay, she's the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So here you can listen to her statement, you can try interpreting her statement, and then you've got a full transcript below, so that her statements, when she opens up a particular agenda item, they tend to have a lot of useful detail, and they tends to use a lot of the words. Like I'm just scrolling down through here, the situation in Ukraine. Civilian casualties, they're talking about Mariupol, the Azov battalion, Azovstal factory, enforced disappearance, so it's very much the issues of the moment. Okay, so that's a good place to look at, for example. Now the other thing at the Human Rights Council which takes place is the Universal Periodic Review, okay, the UPR, where countries come before the Human Rights Council, usually a high-level delegation, and they do every few years, and they present what they have done to implement the human rights treaties and covenants that they are a party to. And having done the presentation, then they will be asked questions, then the other delegations will comment, ask questions, criticize, and so on. It can turn into quite a fluid sort of debate. And these are very good things to practice, okay? Now, the best place actually to practice all these things is the website that I give you a lot of the time for you to find. It's the conference recording site, conf.unog.digitalrecordings. So I always tend to quote that in the description box whenever I post a new episode. And what you do, find the Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council, okay, and then pick any date. I know they met, as I say, back in May, but we'll just put it back since last August. No. So there you go. All these are all the meetings since early last year. If we just prick on a random one, okay. And there you go, you have all the speakers. Now the problem is with the Human Rights Council, it is getting hold of the transcripts, on paper, what they actually said. That's the one chance. So there's no shortage of audio recordings to listen to, and you got it in all the languages. So again, you can cross-reference the languages. That's for the Human Rights Council. Then for the UPR, if you want to practice UPR material, Universal Periodic Review. Okay, you go to HRC/WG on the Universal Periodic Review. Okay, you go there, and again, I'll give you the various meetings. Now, just to give you an idea of what those meetings look like, so that you're prepared. So the country will first, Okay, so here's an example. Okay, this was back on 3rd of May. Okay, so Namibia. Okay, this was Namibia. They were going through the UPR. They will first of all give their statement, opening statement, which would be very sort of pre-prepared, very formulaic, for about 9-10 minutes. One of the ministers, and then the president will open up the floor. Then you'll get all the comments. You see. What we have here, okay, I guess they had a few different ministers presenting here, the Namibians. You can see President Namibia, President Namibia. Then he opens up the floor to all the other speakers. Slovenia, Somalia, South Africa. You see, these are all people commenting, mostly, to pat them on the back. Well done for your work to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, whatever. And after a while, he will then give the floor back to Namibia to respond to any of the questions or criticisms that have been raised. So this is more off the cuff generally, because the minister will be having to just respond and debate at the basis of what he's heard. Then they'll usually have another round of questions, and then they'll have at the end concluding remarks, concluding comments, which again is often prepared in advance. So it's a good combination of things to do. If you want to find out more about a country, okay, it's mainly human rights focused, but if there's like a country you want to learn more about, find out more about its inner workings, these UPRs are excellent places to go and find that, to go and look at. Now, as I say, the problem with this again is finding the originals, and this is the transcripts. And one excellent place to find some of these originals is there's a little YouTube channel that you may have heard of called The Interpretation Station. Very handsome guy, the presenter, extremely witty. Oh, he's hilarious. So he's done a whole load of episodes actually based on the Human Rights Council. So I've done about 100. This is my 142nd episode. There's a lot from the Human Rights Council that you can go and open and look and practice. Okay, so in all languages, certainly French, Russian, Spanish, mainly, and also occasional one in Portuguese. Maybe there's an occasional one in Arabic. So yeah, there's no shortage of Human Rights Council material on the Interpretation Station. There's also a UPR material. I'm just scrolling here through my own directory. So I've got Cuba UPR, Togo UPR, a couple of other UPRs here. Syria UPR, Timor UPR. So okay, there's a few, but it's mainly, there's lots of, just from the general Human Rights Council sessions, and quite a few UPR statements. So there's a lot there on the interpretation station to practice. So for the Human Rights Council, those are the main things. As I say, look at those. You've got the site itself, ohchr.org, and then the Human Rights Council. Look at the reports as another useful source to look at. If you go to documents and resolutions, okay, and if you open the reports for 2021, okay, let's open the English one. Okay, so you can download the report from the previous year, report of the Human Rights Council. And again, this gives you an overview of all the big issues. These are the resolutions that were passed. Look, just looking here, situation of human rights in the Syrian Arab Republic, settlement rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. Ethiopia, situation of human rights in Belarus, assistance to Ukraine in the field of human rights. Okay, so this includes all these important resolutions. If there's a specific issue that you know you're going to be working on, might not be a bad idea just to look up the resolutions that were passed. There you go, checklist of resolutions, decisions, and president's statements that were passed most recently, to again just give you sort of foundational knowledge of what the situation is in a given place. So again, those reports are a good source. Now, if you're going to go to Geneva, and as I say, work in Geneva, and you've got French and Spanish, you are inevitably going to find yourselves working a lot, doing the treaty bodies. Okay, I've talked about a lot in the treaty bodies. I've talked about the treaty bodies a lot during episodes, and I've built episodes on statements taken from them. The treaty bodies are these committees that were established to monitor implementation by states of conventions and covenants that they've signed, treaties, okay? And that's tough. It's very tough, actually. It's very legalistic. And to me, it's perhaps the hardest, it's the most challenging format of meeting that I've done at the UN. You have a lot of legalistic language. You have some of the situations that they discuss are very technical. You can go from 1 minute of discussing something that's extremely legalistic with lots of Latin to the case of some individual, some guy in, I don't know, in Honduras, and how he was abducted or how he was murdered, and all the little grim details. And so your vocabulary can suddenly have to shift from this legalistic style that is perhaps more common to just suddenly having to do these more random everyday situations with use of a lot of just often with a lot of colloquial expressions being used. So anyway, the treaty bodies, again, just Google it and it'll take you there. And it'll list, there you go, these are all the committees. In fact, give you a very handy list here. Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the CERD. Committee on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, Human Rights Committee. The Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW, the CAT, the CRC, the CMW. Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, the SPT. That's a really tough one to do if you're assigned to that one. CRPD. CED, Enforced Disappearance. So again, very similar in nature. They're kind of mini UPRs big sort of, again, ministerial delegation, shall we say, will attend, present, and the committee members will quiz the delegation. There'll be a rapporteur among the committee members who's the sort of main lead, the main inquisitioner, if you like. And again, this can also get quite heated, and that's something you should, if you're going to be working in Geneva, really practice. use this page again, conf.un.ch, because they've got the recordings from all those treaty bodies. Look, here you go. CEDAW, CRE, the SIR, they're meeting right now, for example, Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And yeah, just practice them, right? Again, unfortunately, you don't have the transcripts, but even without the transcripts, you can still learn a lot. See how, again, if you compare the other languages, see what my colleagues did, what their solutions were for some of the tougher expressions. Something very important to practice, okay? It's not something that you can really do but you can't really wing it, I don't think, those sorts of meetings in the treaty bodies. Again, if nothing else, the very minimum you should do is to read through two of the original human rights treaties or covenants, okay? So the first two are the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Okay, those expressions always come as a package. There's about civil and political rights on the one hand, economic, social and cultural rights on the other hand. Remember those two things as a package. And again, here, if you just look up ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, in all 6 languages. Again, you can just read through the whole text. Won't take you too long. Again, that's the most basic thing you do. Those two covenants, I think, the reason why I recommend those two covenants, that's the ICCPR one. Let's see if they've got the ICESR. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? The ICESCR. There you go, you got the full text again. They're the sort of broadest in scope of the, however many there are, is it 11 or something, treaties altogether. They cover the broadest range of issues. These other committees that were created later, like based on these conventions, for example, on elimination of racial discrimination, the rights of the child, migrant workers, they tend to be more narrow in scope. So yeah, if you're going to be doing migrant workers, have a read through the convention on the rights of migrant workers. But again, if you just want a sort of overall knowledge, those are the two best places to start, the two covenants. And now another couple of useful sources then when it comes to the treaty bodies. Again, it's that handsome dude at the interpretation station, right? Okay, so taking you back to the interpretation station episode. So if you go to episode 17, enforced disappearance. This is, I think it was the then rapporteur giving a statement on the situation of enforced disappearance around the world. Okay, it's focused on the speaker's Spanish, but again, I give in that episode I give you a bit of a breakdown of the covenant, of the convention on enforced disappearance. Okay, and then you can, if you've got Spanish, you can practice the original statement and see if there's other things you can take from it. And then if you go to episode 45, persons with disabilities, I give a sort of breakdown of the whole convention here of the CRPD. So if you're working in the CRPD, that's a very good source to look at. I look at what the sort of like-for-like wording is across those 4 languages. I mean, English, French, Spanish and Russian. Again, if you have Arabic or Chinese, you just need a copy of the for yourself of the convention in your own language, and it's pretty easy to follow along. And then based on that episode, you also have episode 49, Haiti and the CRPD presenting to the committee. I did it in 2 parts, episode 49 and episode 61. Okay, so they're very much focused on the CRPD. For the Russians amongst you, the Russian speakers amongst you, the Russisans, we call them at the UN, episode 124, that's all on the Kyrgyzstan at the Committee Against Torture. So that's got a lot of any Russian speakers there. That's got a lot of useful vocabulary. All the sort of vocabulary about things taking place in prisons, during custody, security conditions within penitentiary institutions. There's a lot of good vocab in that. So yeah, those are the main sources I can provide you then for preparing for the treaty bodies. Again, just do your own reading. Look around the site of the OHCHR. Read the covenants. Watch a couple of my episodes and so on. That'll set you in good stead for any meetings you might have to do there. So that's the main, and then okay, so that's for Russian speakers. You're not going to actually be assigned to the treaty bodies that much, because most of the treaty bodies only operate in English, French, and Spanish. I should point out, there's only Russian, Arabic, or Chinese in the event that there's a delegation from one of those countries participating. So in the meetings between, it's just committee members behind closed doors, okay, and those aren't available on the conference recording page. That will all just be in either English, French, or Spanish. The other 3 languages are used if there's a visiting delegation with those languages. Now, if you're a Russian speaker coming to work at Geneva, for example, you won't be assigned to the treaty bodies very often. You are more likely to be assigned to what is called the UN, the Economic Commission of Europe, the UNECE. And it's a bit, the problem with the UNECE is that most of their meetings are actually behind closed doors, and there's usually, now this is all on issues to do with industry, standardization, and so forth. Standardization of all kinds of things in the field of, transportation, measures to combat pollution, travel, shipment of dangerous goods. That's one of the big things you see in Geneva, on dealing with hazardous waste. It's very technical, the things they do at the UNECE. Again, best place to go really is the UNECE homepage. It will give you some of the background, Have a look through there. Our work, for example. These are the main spheres they have. Okay, economic cooperation, environmental policy, forests, housing, population, sustainable energy, statistics, trade, transport. Have a read through. Your best bet is just to have a look around the homepage here. Here's some of the themes they look into. Okay. Yeah, that's the best place to prepare yourself in terms of actually finding statements to practice. Okay, so look, there you go. You can go UNECE, and you can find quite a bit actually. So I'm just looking here since March the 1st, 2021. Oh, there's a good few meetings here that you can browse around. Some interesting, I'm just looking at the titles of some of the sessions. Okay, sustainable development. They tend to be the ones that you can access. They tend to be, I say, the public meetings, which are easier to do actually. Again, it's more just countries presenting their achievements, what they've done in various fields. Now, there's less in the way of debate. It can be quite intimidating when you first get assigned to a UNECE meeting, and it was for me, because you look at the documents and it can be some of this really technical information, for example, on railways, talking about the width of railway gauges from one country to another, all these carnets that are used, bills of lading, and it can be very intimidating. There is a trick, and the way to do it, you'll see it, there's just a knack to doing it, though. Don't panic. With the UNECE meetings, the main structure, what tends to happen is you'll have a whole lot of proposals waiting for you when you walk into the booth, okay? And the chair will just take, and for each proposal there'll be a sponsor who will usually there'll be a proposal with text and so on, and the person and the delegation making the proposal will take the rest of the delegates, as it were, will read through lots of the text that's right in front of you in black and white. That way you can follow along, trying to pick up what words are being used. You'll be able to cross-check again with, let's say, the copy in English to know what word he's using for gauge, whatever. And as long as you follow closely, it's actually not as bad as it looks, because then when the other delegations come take the floor to say whether they like the original proposal or not, again, they'll be referring to specific elements of that original proposal. So as long as you just stay awake, as long as you follow along, you should be all right, keeping track of what the potentially tricky words are. I'll be the first to admit sometimes your mind strays, and for example, there'll be a lot of English. Often happens in English booth, and when you start, you're not paying attention anymore, and then suddenly out of the blue, like Russia will ask for the floor, and then suddenly it's like panic. As you try and desperately find what the like for like words are that he's using. But again, just follow it along. Just when you're working, when you're doing your half hour, just make a point of just following it along closely. And again, for preparation, you've got these public meetings that are available on the digital recordings website, and have a look through the UNECE homepage. I'm just looking here again. I clicked on transport, okay. Vehicle regulations, dangerous goods, road traffic. I mean, it does give you a good summary of what the main topics are. Dangerous goods, it's the only one where there is actually Spanish. So in the UNECE, the working languages are English, French, and Russian. So there's very rarely have any Spanish, Arabic, and French. I know that in dangerous goods, though, you do get Spanish. I know the Spanish colleagues at work always get a fright. The same way that the Russians get a fright when they're assigned to one of the treaty bodies, the Spanizons get a fright when they're assigned to dangerous goods, because they're so used to always doing legalistic Spanish vocabulary, and then suddenly they're thrown into this dangerous goods where it suddenly gets all very technical. It's all very nuts and bolts on, product standards and so on. And these are some of these publications. They can be. This is what they often the work is based on. If you look here, the globally harmonized system, ADR, carriage of dangerous goods, and those proposals that I was talking about, they will usually be proposals to amend some article within, let's say this ADR. Okay, there'll be a proposal with the rationale for changing the wording. So you basically follow. You have whatever the relevant book, the relevant Bible is for each of these subject areas. Like, let's say if it's the international carriage of dangerous goods, you have the ADR open at the paragraph that they're wanting to amend. You follow it along. You have the proposal next to it, and you just sort of track it. And so that's again, if you're going to you're going to be working at the UNEC, it's maybe just worth opening one of these books, one of these pages, and just finding out a little bit more. You can download all the publications, and that's the best way to get a feel for the wording that they're going to have. those are your sort of Geneva mainstays. So your Human Rights Council, including the UPR, treaty bodies, and the UNECE. Now you do have other stuff, a couple of other things I would just highlight as well before we finish. Disarmament, you're going to get quite a lot of stuff on disarmament actually in Geneva, whether you're a Russisant or a Hispanisant. Again, use the practice here at the digital recordings page, conference on disarmament, CD, okay. Find one of the public meetings. Big pro tip, especially if you've got Spanish in your combination, practice Cuba. If ever you find Cuba, practice doing him. Again, you don't have the transcript, unfortunately, but the Cuban speaker in the conference of disarmament, he's such a good speaker. He's tough. I mean, he's constantly using all these idioms and proverbs, but he's really challenging, but it's going to really improve your ability to interpret Spanish, I think. So practice the CD. Also in terms of the CD, okay, a couple of useful episodes on the interpretation station. A couple of the earlier episodes, okay. Episodes 12 and 13, so both by Belgium speaking at the CD in episode 12. I give you a link, I give various links in fact. I give you some information on how it was set up, the goal and so on, the structure and how it works. So those are two good episodes to give you practice at the CD. Also for Arabic speakers, again taking the CD, Syria on nuclear non-proliferation. So there's a lot of information on that episode. Say for Arabic speakers on the conference on disarmament. Also a bit for Italian, any Italians out there. I think I did one episode, Armi Nucleari. I think this is a statement by Malaysia at the conference on disarmament. You can find out some of how some of those the buzzwords go into Italian. So those are good all sources for the conference on disarmament. That's quite high pressure. That can be quite high pressure actually. After the Human Rights Council, that's perhaps the highest pressure, the conference on disarmament. Then you have, okay, just generally, okay, we talked about the SDGs. Environmental issues are going to crop up across the board. So be prepared for that. Good place to get your vocab there is, as I say, from the SDGs. But also, you know, one thing I looked at the other day, the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, that's a really good source. And this is, I might just make an episode on the UNFCCC again, take you through the Paris Accords. Because I must admit, I only looked through it for the first time the other day. And again, it's one of those things I tend to just sort of wing when a lot of these expressions, as you know, that's what happens. But I was reading, you got, in all 6 of the official languages. Have a read through that to find the most relevant environmental climate change vocab. And as I say, I'm going to try and make an episode on that very soon. Another thing you'll get in Geneva, not just in Geneva, but certainly in New York and elsewhere, indigenous issues, okay, on indigenous people. In Geneva, you have what's called the MRIP, which is called the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So again, have a read through of that. For example, now in New York they've got the Permanent Forum, but it's a lot of the same issues. I noted some episodes on indigenous issues quite recently. It's a subject I'd sort of neglected. 134, okay, there's a couple of episode 134. You got a couple of speakers there from indigenous peoples. Guatemala was one of them. You have also in Geneva, you have meetings of UNCTAD, the UN Commission on Trade and Development. That some of the trade vocab can be quite tough, quite challenging. Again, you can practice on the digital recordings page. There's lots of the different UNCTAD commissions to choose from. There's also, maybe the one final thing I'll mention for this episode is the International Law Committee, which I've covered quite a bit. Now they come up there, I think they meet twice a year in Geneva, and at length, like for 7 weeks at a time. They were meeting just before I went on holiday, and they can be really tough, okay? And I have done, and the place to go, the go-to place for finding out what to prepare yourself for meetings at the International Law Commission is episode 132, okay, that I made. International Law Boot Camp. So there was an exhibition at the UN at UNOG recently, and it gave you all the history of how the commission was created and their areas of work. And it's really good. It really had some excellent vocab, and I take you through that exhibition, again highlighting key expressions, key events, and so on. So if you have the misfortune to be assigned to the ILC, I highly recommend that you watch episode 132. I'm not one to self-promote, as you know, but watch episode 132 on the International Law Boot Camp, and that should sort of set you in good stead for any meetings of that nature. Well, that I think is that's the main stuff basically at Geneva. The main stuff. That's a good diplomatic expression, a very professional sounding. Now look, I think those are the main committees, main bodies that I've taken you through. Hopefully that's going to give you a few pointers now to work from. There is other stuff. There's quite lots of other stuff that comes up here and there in passing, but those are the mainstays, I would say, of the work in Geneva. If there's any other thing I've left out or anything that you want to ask about, please do comment. Please do ask me any more questions in the comments below. I always love getting comments. It's always good, so that I can perhaps shed some more light in a future episode. So I think the next one I'm going to make is one on how to prepare for New York. And as I say, if anyone has any more knowledge working in Vienna or Nairobi, we could maybe make an episode together. That would be fun. So listen, if you have found this episode useful, if you have enjoyed my company, the company of my buddy Mag, see Maggie's she's still asleep. That's what it's like having to listen to me. I do put people to sleep. Hi Maggie, awake? Do you want to come and say hello? Do you want to come and say hello to everyone? Or we'll just let you sleep? We'll just let her sleep. If you have enjoyed, therefore, this episode of the Interpretation Station, please do smash the like button, as I say, comment and share, and please do remember to subscribe. Very importantly, subscribe. It's the only fee that the Interpretation Station charges, and it has, as ever, been a pleasure, and all that is left for me to do before I go to work is to say that episode 142 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.